They disappeared for 1500 years. Death came in a split second, and their return was an astonishing coincidence. They were overtaken by a darkness that shrouded the sun and a fear that rotted their souls. I come to tell you not just the usual tales of the destruction of Pompeii, but much more. The true story of the people turned to stone. If you want to hear about something more brutal than a horror movie, sit back and get ready for a thrilling journey through 2,000 years. Look carefully at this photo. They are ordinary people known as the 13 fugitives trying to escape Pompeii. As they tried to save their lives, a wind of 350 degrees Celsius wiped them out in a split second. Some were left sleeping, others huddled together, praying to the gods. So how did they turn to stone, and what had happened to them in the last 24 hours? Was this a punishment from God, or was it an ordinary natural disaster? Life was as vibrant as ever in Pompeii, a city of 15,000 inhabitants that was part of the Roman Empire and today lies on the Italian coast. Thanks to its rich volcanic soils, agricultural yields were much higher than in other Roman cities, and maritime trade also enriched the city. Pompeii, where Roman nobles had summer villas, was an ideal location for vacations and small getaways. Gladiator fights were held in arenas built 100 years before the Colosseum in Rome. Wild parties were held in brothels. Slaves met all kinds of unimaginable needs of their masters. People had a pleasant time in the baths and shopped in the Forum. Thanks to its wealth and its position as a gateway to the world, the architecture and art created by the well-educated Pompeians was so advanced that it influenced the architecture of both Europe and years later, America. The city had more than 100 taverns and inns where sailors and travelers could spend their time. And of course the most profitable profession was baking. Look, in this mural you see Terentius Neo, the baker in Pompeii, and his wife. The scroll in the hand of Terentius Neo, one of the wealthy men of the city, shows that his wife was his partner in business as in life. They obviously had a happy home, but how were they to know that the great catastrophe awaited them very soon? In Pompeii, the temples were full of pious Romans. Moreover, the Romans not only believed in gods, they were also interested in black magic. One amulet found in the excavations was a spell cast by one of the women who couldn't share the same man. It reads as follows: "Slave of Pylamation Postilius, I dedicate his face, his hair, his mind, his breath, his vital organs to the gods of hell, so that you will not have him, that he will hate her, and she will hate him. May his testicles be useless so that she will always be empty inside." People went about their daily lives, but they were also aware that something had gone wrong recently. The earthquakes that had been going on for weeks had begun to cause panic among the population. The city's water pipes were damaged, some of the baths and pools were unusable, and more than half of Pompeii's inhabitants, especially the rich, were already fleeing the city. However, no one thought that the earthquakes were caused by the movements of Mount Vesuvius, which was located 8 kilometers from the city and had been dormant for years. By the time they realized this, it would be too late. Mount Vesuvius is the most active volcano on mainland Europe, and more than 3 million people still live around it. It is therefore considered one of the deadliest volcanoes in the world. It also has another historical feature. This volcano is where Spartacus escaped and hid with 77 of his friends, and it has been asleep for a while, in a delicate sleep. Now we are going together to its awakening 2,000 years ago. The first big eruption of Vesuvius in years takes place on October 24th, 79 at 9 a.m. The countdown to the apocalypse has begun. The people of the city take to the streets with a great noise. For the people of Pompeii, who cannot make sense of what is happening, this is just the beginning. Gathered in the amphitheater you see now to discuss what to do in the face of what they have experienced. There is still no reason to fear a mountain covered with trees. The situation appears to be temporary. Nevertheless, the eerie spectacle of the volcanic eruption causes another significant population to flee the city. At 12 noon, Vesuvius erupts for the second time. But this is a far more catastrophic eruption than the mornings. This eruption is so big that it is thousands of times more powerful than the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. The volcano starts spewing 100,000 tons of ash, lava, and pumice per second. The impact of the eruption blew the roofs off many houses and threw people to the ground. Panic broke out in the city, and a 35-kilometer column of lava and ash particles rose into the sky, creating a terrible sight. Can you imagine the scene? A giant 35-kilometer pillar of lava, ash and stone rising from a mountain. By 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the sky was already covered in black smoke. It was impossible to see the sun anymore, and those who could look up could only see smoke, ash and stone. The volcano wasn't just spewing lava and ash. Pumice stones from Vesuvius were raining down on Pompeii, and 30-centimeter piles had formed in the streets. Tens of thousands of kilometers of black smoke created lightning bolts of unimaginable intensity. Imagine the scene like this: pumice and ash raining down from the black smoke that obscures the sun, and huge lightning bolts painting the sky red every second. The Pompeians must have thought the gods were at war with each other. After the second explosion on the 12th, the people realized the situation and fell into chaos. People fled through the streets with pillows on their heads, trying to take shelter in the houses they thought were safe. Those who could enter the houses locked their doors to escape the looting, and the pumice stones that fell on them were no longer as small as in the morning, but bigger and harder. Archaeological excavations have recovered the bodies of 396 people who died in Pompeii from the pumice rain. The volcanic debris that reached Pompeii at 5 p.m. was still not hot or toxic. Yes, the city was covered in smoke from the volcano. Ash piles approaching 50 centimeters high had accumulated in the streets, and the pumice rain from the sky had increased, but no lethally toxic or hot debris had yet reached the city. Yet deaths were still being caused by the rain of stones and the collapse of roofs. In fact, it is estimated that a third of Pompeii's victims were killed by the collapse of roofs. Meanwhile, another city had already been destroyed, along with its inhabitants. Closer to Mount Vesuvius, the city of Herculaneum was covered by the pyroclastic flow, and all its inhabitants were already dead. The destruction of Herculaneum was so rapid that even the eggs and fresh bread you see now remain as they were on the first day. This is a baby charred in the explosion. This baby did not live the life that awaited him, but it is still talked about 2,000 years later. I wonder which one he would have preferred. Herculaneum would have completely disappeared under volcanic debris, forgotten, only to be discovered by chance in 1738 by workers digging the foundations of a summer palace for King Charles of Naples, Charles of Bourbon. But let's get back to our main subject, Pompeii. The story there is much bigger. The people of Pompeii thought the situation would improve despite everything. The rich even chained their slaves to prevent them from escaping and waited for the disaster to pass. But the black clouds were tens of thousands of meters thick and hundreds of kilometers fast, and most of the 2,000 people who had not yet left the city were still alive. Look, the man you see in this picture is one of the most iconic symbols of Pompeii, and he is known as a mule driver, and it is thought that he carried loads for a fee. Because when he was found, the mule's body was as preserved as he was. He surrendered to his fate as he forced his way into a restroom locked from the inside. According to archaeologists, he knocked repeatedly, but no one answered, so he took refuge under his blanket and breathed his last. On the night of October 24th to October 25th, we still know that there were people in Pompeii who thought that everything would return to normal, because the people who continued to have fun in the bars met their death here, and the money boxes in the bars were full. The slaves continued to serve their masters. The pumice and ash heaps on the streets were 80 centimeters high, and it was almost impossible to walk. It was unbelievable. But there are still people who continue to enjoy themselves. Maybe this was their last farewell to an accepted helplessness. We will never know. Let them have their fun. The devastating wave is about to come. So far, Pompeii has seen a rain of ash, smoke and pumice, and several times the devastating clouds of gas that were to deliver the killing blow have crashed at great speed against the city walls and dispersed, giving the people of Pompeii a little more time to survive. But in the last great wave, a cloud of 350 degrees Celsius fire engulfed the city at a speed of 100 kilometers, and the last surviving Pompeians died before they knew what hit them. It took only a second for them to lose their lives. In their last moments, they felt nothing, saw nothing. All those people we see today, eating, sleeping, hugging each other, most of them died in that last great cloud of fire. Without even realizing what had happened, they were left in the shape they were in their last moments, dying as a story for us, for generations 2,000 years later. At 8 a.m. on October 25th, there were no survivors in Pompeii. The burning cloud that had managed to reach the city had destroyed every last one of them, and the piles in the streets reached 3 meters high. At the end of the days-long rain of ash, the city was completely buried underground, and the book of Pompeii was closed. But we know the whole process that happened in Pompeii, the fear on people's faces, the pain, the magnitude of the explosion, minute by minute, because there was only one witness to the whole tragedy who survived, and that was young Pliny. Pliny the Younger, together with his uncle Pliny the Elder, came to Pompeii as soon as they heard the news of the explosion and started to note down the developments. In letters 25 years after the explosion, Pliny the Younger described the case in detail, and this is how it survived to the present day. Until 2022, the explosion was thought to have occurred in August. However, with the joint studies carried out in 2022 and the findings uncovered, we are sure that it took place in October. Not only were the clothes of the bodies recovered more appropriate for October-November than August, but also the vegetables and fruits sold by grocers on the days of the disaster were products of October. With the addition of other findings, the exact date is thought to be October 24th and 2579. The rediscovery of Pompeii, like that of Herculaneum, was a coincidence. In 1592, workers were digging an underground aqueduct in the mills of architect Dominica Fontana when they hit ancient walls covered with paintings and inscriptions. Yes, this was Pompeii, the lost city. But little attention was paid to it, and excavations in the area had to wait for another 200 years. Now get ready, because the information you are about to learn could change the way you think about Pompeii. You all know the people who were stoned to death in Pompeii, but the reason why 99% of these people were petrified is that the people who excavated Pompeii in the late 1800s poured plaster through the holes they drilled to remove the bodies without disturbing the position of the bones. So, most of the people you see, we petrified them to preserve their position, not nature. As a matter of fact, 1,150 bodies have been exhumed so far in Pompeii. Only 106 of them have been brought to the surface as molds. The rest were skeletonized because there was no need to cast molds. In total, nearly 2,000 people are thought to have died in the disaster in Pompeii. Most of the dead were old and sick, or devoted sons who did not want to leave their families. They were also forced slaves. Very few rich people escaped Pompeii and died. In all its aspects, the Pompeian disaster was one of the most dramatic scenes in history. But it has left us today the most preserved city in the Roman world, the archaeological excavation site where we can come closest to the world of antiquity. There is no other ancient city in the world today as well preserved as Pompeii. We owe this to the fact that the ashes of Vesuvius covered the city. We owe it to this catastrophe. Look carefully at this house, the Villa of Mysteries. Its walls are covered with religious drawings of the Romans and the happy days of the family. But the last thing left of it was this little girl. This is the Villa of Diomedes. It's a ruined wreck now, but look at the splendor of those years. All that's left of it are 36 corpses in the basement of the house. 18 women and children, probably servants, huddled together, breathing their last. Life is full of tragedies, pain and sadness. Even 2,000 years later, it was people like us who lived through it all. People with feelings, people with families, people who loved each other, people with dreams. Many were innocent, many were poor, many were hopeless. This was not a punishment from God. Many of the people God was going to punish had already left the city. The wicked had won again, and the innocent had died. You are on the Interesting Topics channel. Don't forget to subscribe for more valuable content. See you in the next video.